Welcome, crew members, to another bright day in Lab Alpha 19, creating yesterday's tomorrows today.
Bad news. Zero idea where the base is, but I did find the name of a scientist there.
So, if we find the scientist, we find the base Joko's using to launch his attacks.
One of their convoys just received an unusual order to delay their arrival. Taking their place should get you inside.
The commander leading me around in chains? Not a chance.
Shadows fall, still the stars find their way. Who needs the light? Fear not this night.
Hi guys, and happy Friday, and welcome back to another episode of Guild Chat. I'm your host Ruby, and we're talking about a bug in the system today. Let's jump right in because we have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. You guys have had an interesting few weeks. Please don't cry.
Many bugs in the system.
It's okay, you're fine. I'll let you guys go down the line and introduce yourselves and talk about what you do here at ArenaNet and what you worked on for this episode.
Cool. I'm Clayton Kisco. I'm team lead game designer for episode 2. So I worked on the open world stuff and then split time in tons of meetings and making sure that things were going as planned.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I'm Jessica Price. I am a story editor on Living World, which means getting a lot of people in a room and making them agree on a storyline for the overall season, getting together with designers and writers, and making sure that the outlines for individual episodes work for narrative and for gameplay. Doing script polishes to make sure everything's in a consistent voice and tone, and I don't know, a ton of other stuff.
So much
stuff.
Hi, I'm Cam. I don't know what camera. I'm Cameron Rich. I'm a game designer. I mostly just implement different styles of content. For this episode, I worked on the open world as well as some of the instance story content as well.
And you moved over partway through. We'll have to talk about that in a little bit. But I want to talk about this trailer first because this is one of the best trailers we've done. And huge props to everybody involved. Yeah. It went through a lot of iterations, though.
It did. I mean, it really was a team effort. Like, every change that got us closer to it working came from somebody different. So, like, I wrote the original script for it, and I was like, we need to do a trailer where the first half is a heist, and then it's like, oh crap, we thought we were doing a heist, and it turns out we thought we were in a heist movie, and we're actually in a zombie outbreak movie. So, like, that was the genesis of it, but then, you know, the way I had written it didn't really convey the tonal change enough. And so we spent a lot of time trying to get it right, iterating. It just wasn't gelling. And then someone on the cinematics team, I think it was Jason Byfield, came back with a cut where he had put the second half that's in the Inquest lab. He'd set it to the Lana Del Rey version of I Know You from Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
Which gave it this sort of eerie, and like he'd slowed it down and distorted it and ended on this picture of Joko, which gave it this really eerie, like, sort of sarcastic, like Joko's taunting you feel. And as soon as that came back, like the whole thing really started to gel. But then we couldn't license that song, so somebody else on marketing, I don't remember who, suggested, well, what if we re-recorded a creepy version of Fear Not This Night? And so like there just kept being these ideas coming from different people on different teams, like, oh, what if we did this? And each one like took us a little bit closer to what it was. But yeah, this is not true, but I feel like we had as many meetings about the trailer as we had about the actual episode to get it right.
It feels like it.
There was definitely a moment in one of our meetings in a meeting room adjacent to the meeting that you're in with cinematics, and just hearing the uproar of excitement going, they got something really good on their hands right now.
Everybody
Like,
go over there.
Yeah, that version with the Lana Del Rey song actually went internally viral.
Yeah,
Where
right.
like people who were like on, commerce or whatever, or like, oh my gosh, have you seen the trailer? And it was getting sent around internally, which was when we like knew that like we were really on the right track and it wasn't just us. We had something really magical there.
Well, I remember there was a marketing meeting where we were talking about, here's what's going on with the trailer. We're considering a couple of different ways. We're considering maybe doing this song or the creepy version of Fear Not This Night. And there was just this moment where like all the air was sucked out of the room because everybody went, oh, you have to do that.
Yeah.
Everybody was so excited. And I feel like it turned out as awesome as we thought it was going to when we heard that.
For sure. When you have that passion, excitement, like behind something, that whatever you're creating, like the end result is going to usually mimic like that level, right? So
Yeah. Well, and there was a lot of really good, like we listened to feedback from players where they're like, we want to know what the features in each release are, which is hard when you're trying to do like a movie style trailer that's supposed to be basically a mini story in and of itself, to like provide a list of features. So for a long time we were like, well, can we put it at the end after that final screen? But we really liked the sort of like elegiac feeling of just ending on the music being quiet and just that that still screen. And I think it was Jason Byfield again, came up with almost treating the list of features like it was part of the preparation for pulling off the heist. And, he put it with the beat and music.
That was one of my favorite moments.
Yeah, and, like, it works suddenly. So, a lot of really cool.
It worked extremely, extremely well. And watching it evolve over weeks and weeks, just going in. And even though I missed the version you're talking about, I'm a little crabby about that.
I don't even know if it still exists.
With my luck, it probably does
evidence
not.
has been burned.
That's right.
It is
I'll never
gone
see it
for
again.
good.
I'm so sad because I can imagine how much fun that was. And I wish we could just license everything that we want.
I know.
Not get sued.
It was really cool seeing the reaction around the studio when we finally sent the last version out, because we got everybody into a room for a meeting and we were going to show it on the big screen, and we didn't have audio, and we were like, no. We can't show this trailer without the music. And later that day, as the link was being sent around, you just heard all around the office like, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
Yeah.
I had people run over to my desk and be like, that was amazing! And I'm like,
so
that's not
glad.
me. Like, go talk to Cinematics. Like, they're the ones that...
The fan reaction is also like a really big important part, and I think because they're so behind that direction that you guys have decided to go through, I think we're going to try to be doing stuff like that in the future, like the same level. Right?
That was a conversation that we had internally as well, because Z posted that we're holding off a little bit and we're going to. I had been so excited to get that trailer in front of the community for weeks.
I know.
We're trying to make this call, and we made that call. Okay, we're gonna hold off, and I just
all of us had our button on the Twitter of like ready to share.
We were ready. We were so excited to get that, and it hurt to wait.
It did,
but it was for the best, and that's actually the next thing that I wanted to talk about. You guys have 5 seconds for bugs and system jokes. Okay. So, if there are any that you haven't made yet.
No.
But it was, and it was, we've talked about this, it was in the service of making the game better, because you guys were doing a lot of new things and bringing a lot of things to life that we haven't done before.
This is one of the most ambitious episodes we've done, not only narratively and the amount of dialogue, but from the amount of gameplay and content that we put in, and the uniqueness of the content in terms of like moving platforms with elevators and a boat.
I know.
And then we have instance to instance to instance kind of stuff going on. We put a lot on our plates, and so we needed that extra time to polish it and make sure everything was working well. I don't know if we were going to go into why, like, specifically, but we did talk about instance to instance to instance being an issue and something we found out.
That's something I would actually kind of like us to talk about, because it was just an interesting way that you had to test it, and bringing that into the game again made the game better. But there was a lot going on.
Yeah. We have not done it to that level before.
No.
And when we found the issue, we realized, this was something we needed to fix, and so we wanted to get the fix. We're very confident in that fix, and then the next day would go down and it would be like, okay, it wasn't fixed. The unique thing about this problem is that, like, because it would take like a full build and we couldn't just like iterate it on very quickly in internal tools, it took a while to keep testing stuff. So we had to actually upgrade our own tech tools to be able to test this thing more rapidly. Yeah. And it was only then that we were like, okay, this is a much more complex issue than we originally thought. And so Charlie, our gameplay programmer, like, did some like really deep diving into that code, had to learn that code for the first time. Jeez. And like understand its intricacies, and then figure out a fix for that.
It's a bit like trying to plug the holes in a leak and just seeing another one spring up over here, because every time we found a fix, something wrong would happen. Yeah. And it just, kudos to Charlie, because he just worked his butt off to get it fixed.
Well, and like, this episode was so ambitious in terms of, like, Rata Primus is as big as Rata Sum, right? Yeah. Like, we used Rata Sum as the basis to start from that map. Like, it's massive, and there's so much going on, and like, just the scope of it, there were so many things that could have gone wrong and didn't.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, this is, in some ways, it's a pretty good scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, you had the bug that kept evolving, and for a while you were limited. And what were you testing it once or twice a day is all you could do for a while?
And so that's why we had to upgrade our own internal tools to be able to test this much quicker. And then the other interesting thing about it is that we went through so many iterations of trying to fix this bug that when we fixed the bug, it was still broken because of an earlier fix that we tried.
No.
Yeah. And so we were like, oh my gosh, like, get rid of that thing that we tried to fix it before, and then that actually fixed the whole thing. So it was like, all in all, it was like 5 to 10 like extra little bits of problems, like Cam was talking about, like as you're closing one leak, one is popping up, and then one of the leaks we tried to close, we had to get rid of, right? And then that fixed everything. And then to your comment, Jessica, about like how big Rata Primus is. We found when Aaron was developing that instance that, like, we had an idea of how that gameplay was going to function, but because of the size of it, we realized that there were some really empty parts in between the major beats that we had set. And so he had to actually go in and try to he had to reconceptualize his design to fill in that space a little bit.
Really?
And it works all for the better. But yes, it, like, in terms of ambitious, like, it was really big.
Yeah,
a lot going on there.
It was actually really scary the days leading up to release. I know, me personally, I was just like, oh gosh, what's going to go wrong? Like, what fires are we going to see pop up? And the reception to all of the things that we kind of took that risk on has been so positive. It's made it all worth it.
Yeah.
I just realized, because we're familiar with what was going on, we didn't think about it. We never actually explained what was going wrong with the instance to instance.
Yeah.
We were just like, stuff wasn't working, but we're not going to.
Yeah. Okay. So, so what was happening is that, sorry, there's just so much.
I know.
When you go from instance to instance, and this was not on normal play. We noticed that on replay, that when you got out of an instance in Chapter 5, spoilers, by the way.
I said we're gonna talk about spoilers, you guys. Okay.
Perfect.
Mark got to do the thing. Okay.
Great. Okay. So when you're fighting Lanai and you're jumping between the different instances, it's not capturing what quest you were on, and so it thought you were on whatever quest on the replay you started. So if you played out of order, you were starting the episode with Chapter 1's quest goal, and then when you got into that replay, instead of saying kill Lanai here, it would say, oh, do get the mail from Keto. And so we're like, what is going on? And what's so crazy is that our replay in order is coded a little bit differently, or I don't know, I'm saying this uselessly because I'm not a programmer, but
it's okay.
It's affected by the code differently than replay out of order. So replay in order, replay out of order, and then play through naturally for the first time is all very different and is affected by like the content that we put in differently. And so we had to like, I don't know, it's like when you're a kid and you're playing like, your consoles and your controllers are all like bees nest of stuff and you're just pulling everything out to see where everything goes. Like it was a bit like that. So
that is the best description.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
it was
like
wild.
it so much.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So we fixed that.
And it was easy.
Yeah.
No. We're banning that word.
Yeah.
Yes, you guys, that word should be. You guys were heroes. Seriously, I know how long you guys worked, and the long hours you guys worked, and everybody looked so tired.
You know, Jessica, hit out the nail on the head. It was like it's a team effort, but it's not only this team either. Like we had other teams and other programmers, and like everybody just come to our aid and jump in and help, and we were super grateful for that.
Yeah, everyone pitching in was a huge factor that made a big difference. I wanted to talk about the weather bug just because that one tickles me and I get a kick out of it. But that was
also the aliens.
Instance.
Yes.
Oh, the aliens. That's right. But we're not saying it's aliens.
Aliens.
We're not that we're saying it's aliens.
right. We're not saying it's aliens,
but the weather bug in the meta event was just one of those weird things that.
Yeah. So it only ever happened whenever you would go to a new map, like a new instance of the open world map. So we never really saw it a lot during our initial testing because we never saw a new map pop up after everybody had already done things. Mm-hmm. And so you would start the meta. Spoiler alert again if you guys haven't done it yet. But
this whole show is one big long spoiler alert.
You would start the meta, and the storms would start to appear around the island. And so you'd go off and you'd do the first objectives. And then it would wait a little bit before giving you the next part of the meta. And during that time, it would just change the weather back to normal. So it's a sunny day, there's not a whole lot of rain going on, but the meta event would be like, the storms are getting worse. You've got to go and solve this problem. And the char in the village would actually reference that and have this dialogue about like, oh, what's going on? And it's getting scary out here.
It was the storms in your heart, Cameron. It was the storms in your heart.
Where were you 2 weeks ago? You were dealing with the aliens.
So that wasn't me.
No, that was the other thing, Cameron, if you want to talk about the aliens that descended upon the Omicron village.
Yeah. I just learned about this. I'm fascinated.
It was hilarious. As we were going through and kind of polishing up the last parts of our episode, our map artist was putting the finishing touches on the Sandswept Isles, which is one of the most beautiful maps. Mm-hmm. And we were just in the middle of testing one day, walking around, and there is this gigantic human just sitting like this, looking out over the horizon. And we're looking at him like, what is that? And he's not targetable. We can't click on him. And in our internal tools, like, we could see that no one had specifically placed him there, right? And so we're just like sitting here like, what is happening? Did one of the props get accidentally changed over to this model? And so we were looking around for like a good half the day. And then our map artist came by and we were like, what is this? And oh, I'm testing lighting? And he had put these creatures, because we'd found them all over the map at this point.
Oh my gosh.
Just all over. He was putting these creatures around, testing how lighting would affect the different character models, because that was one of the more polishy things that kind of happens later on in development. And so for a while we thought that aliens had descended upon the Sandswept Isles, and we were going to have to change our narrative.
Right.
This is not how I pictured the Six coming back at all.
Right. I think what happened was Dan, our environment artist, was also working with Justin. Justin was doing some of the like shallow water areas, and so when Dan put these in onto a layer, we originally like, hey Dan, can you get rid of this once we figured out like what it was, right? And Dan was like, sure, I'll get rid of that. But when Justin was working, I don't think he had the same save, and so he was unknowingly putting them back in. So we went about like a week or two with like these things supposedly gone, but then they would just show up again, and we're like, okay, seriously, get the giant aliens out of this map, please. Because we were also getting like crazy bugs from QA of like, yeah, like giants, why? And, you know what I mean? We're like, we'll work on it.
Or
people
like
come
that
up to us.
fountain out in the middle of the ocean that just kept reappearing.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Weird. Yeah.
What was this?
Charlie was working on some stuff, and we have these folders that allow us to put some stuff in there, but it won't ship to live. And so in a lot of instances when we test it, like, it doesn't show up. But in some cases when we test it another way, it will show up. And it freaked out everybody because there was this giant floating fountain out of nowhere with architecture that doesn't match the Omicron or the Inquest. So that caused like a little bit of a stir, but we quickly deleted it. So yeah, like this episode we found a lot of stuff of like, why is that there? And
weird.
heart palpitations.
Weird
and
stuff.
yeah.
The fact that all of this randomness was happening, you had this insane instance thing that you kept having to struggle with just because of the way things were working. And all of this stuff showing up, and other bugs that you fix, like the AI bug that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Which we should talk about. Fixing all of that stuff and still developing this episode, and with a holiday break in the middle.
Yeah.
Where the office is just closed for a while.
Yeah.
I am in awe that you guys shipped this thing.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
We try to scope for it. Like, we try to put in, be like, okay, everybody's going to be gone during this time. But, like, the other thing that, like, we can't really predict is the flu this season. It's kind of boring to talk about, but it's, like, serious.
So
we watched it come across, like, we have a giant room, right? We have an open office seating plan with rows, right? And it started at the other end of the room, and, like, week by week, it took out each consecutive row. And so, like...
It's coming!
Yeah, like, I sit in the leads row with, like, Z and Lindsay and Crystal and stuff, and we're all like... It's coming for us! It's coming.
How much can we get done? It's 4 rows away.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
It started with Fractals, and then it started hitting our team, and then it hit, like, episode 1's team, and then next, and, like, yeah. I feel bad for the leads, like, seeing this wave of flu, and it's, like,
it's worse to be last,
yeah,
right? Like, no.
I legitimately considered moving my desk out into the hallway one week just so that it
You
might
would have been
skip
smart
me.
to do
Nobody would
that.
have faulted you for this.
No.
Like, set up in one of the small meeting rooms at that point and just never come out. Barricade the door with hand sanitizer.
The flu knew what it was doing too, because it would always take out someone when we needed him that week. When this instance bug happened, we're like, okay, let's get Charlie. We get an email, Charlie's sick. We're like, okay, and he's out for a week. You know what I mean? And then, like, I think we needed Tyler to fix some stuff, and then he was out by that bug. And Cameron, you got hit by it.
It was malicious. It was focused. It was intentional. It was.
And the flu put these big models in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, it wasn't aliens. It was the flu.
It was the. I mean, the flu might be an alien.
It's
That's the twist.
Okay, so this is conspiracy
Aliens.
theory guild chat, and I kind of dig it.
Yeah, right.
I'm on board. Let's talk about the AI with the NPCs, just to say, you know what, I'm not going to be here anymore.
So
and you guys fixed this.
So we've been working on this episode for a while, since before Path of Fire shipped. And as we were developing this new tech for Path of Fire, one of the things was upgrading our AI so that our creatures could be a little bit more intelligent about how they moved and where they moved in combat. Could be.
Too smart.
Right?
Maybe they knew what was coming. And
for some reason, during conversations where creatures are just standing there and they're talking to each other and the player character is talking, we would just have, like, rocks suddenly start moonwalking away. Just in the middle of the conversation. She would still say her lines. Yeah, and she's just like, getting out of here. Not comfortable in this situation anymore. Or we'd be in combat and we'd be running and you'd have the like Rox and Bram and Boudica following you down the lane, and suddenly Bram would just start kind of like side skipping off to the side, and then he'd come back for a little bit and be like, okay, I'm back in line.
Nope.
It was ridiculous, and there were so many times where we were just sitting there like, well, why? Why is this happening? Because there's no rhyme or reason to it. You would just see it happen randomly, even on creatures who literally had no script attached to them other than, hey, sit here and, like, play this animation.
And do nothing else.
Right, and participate in this one conversation, but don't do anything else. And suddenly they would just be moonwalking backwards.
Nope. Getting out of here. Scarab plague. Scary.
I don't remember exactly what was causing it, but I think we fixed it. That, or they just, like, learned that we were onto them.
Yeah.
They stopped.
They can see us. It's like Toy Story when we're not looking.
Yeah. You give them a little bit of intelligence, and they look around at the environment that we have put them in and what's going to happen to them, and they're like,
I feel like it was working as intended, frankly. I mean, look around. I'd moonwalk away too.
Yeah.
I know how this ends. I want nothing to do with this. I have to confess, I'm honestly a little sad that you fixed it because I never got to see it. But if there's video, somebody let me know.
Maybe we can find it. If that evidence is not burned yet, we can find it
I'm
for
sure
you.
there's a bug in our system that we can check
There
for.
it
My favorite thing in episode 2 is the Shredder Golem.
Yes.
Yeah.
In
Yes.
the Inquest Cube, that's just, since everything has gone to hell in a handbasket, it's just shredding all the incriminating documents, and there's documents flying all over the place and stuff. And I mean, like, the Shredder Golem gets a lot of our videos of things that go wrong.
And he doesn't care either, right? Like,
No,
you just
no.
walk around, he's like, I gotta get this done. This has to happen now.
I think is
the
he
prime
the
directive.
is he the one that's going go away, go away, go away?
Oh yeah, either that or another one. But there's a couple ones like one's like hitting his head on the ground. Like they've all gone like haywire. Yeah. Aaron did a really great job creating some of those scenes.
Oh,
so.
that's fantastic. A lot of the dialogue, and we were talking before about all of these little side things going on, that some of it feels like the player character we're speaking for the player character in a good way, like when we're needling Bram about being in chains. Because you guys, you all felt that way. Don't lie.
It's a really fine line, and Bram, I came in just as we were sort of re-envisioning what season 4 was going to be. So like my first day here, I literally got pulled out of my orientation meeting to go into a story breaking meeting. It's like, no, we got to figure out what we're doing with season 4. We got to do it right now.
Deep-end stuff right there.
Oh, I mean, like, I'm not sure that I've actually signed all the forms that allow me to work here because they pulled me out of the orientation
Note to
meeting.
check on that later. You might need that.
Yeah,
And
no.
those story meetings are brutal, right? Like
Oh,
they're
and
like
it was
weeks at a time,
it was
all day.
8 hours a day.
Yeah.
In the room, in a room in 5-6, conference room 5-6 was my home for several weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
5-6?
Yeah, 8 hours a day with Mo and Z and Tom and Lindsay and a bunch of the other stakeholders trying to figure out like what is going to happen in this season, because we had shifted direction. And so like there was already gameplay done for episodes 1 and 2 that we had to retrofit into whatever we came up with. So that was fun. But so one of the things that, for me and for Tom, our narrative director, coming in fairly recently, is there's a bunch of stuff that's been done that we have to reckon with. And one of those things is Bram's attitude. And we didn't want to just have him have a, complete change of heart and be buddy-buddy with the commander. We wanted the evolution of his relationship with the commander to feel real. So, like, there's a lot of narrative work that we're having to do to get them to a point where the relationship is different from what it's been. But, it's like, we also do want to have a little fun with it and give the players some catharsis. But the other thing is, we have to be really careful with the player character. Like, most of the interesting dialogue doesn't come from the player character, right? It comes from the NPCs. Because when you have a game like Halo or like BioShock, where you are playing a specific character that's already predetermined, people will accept a lot more personality and a lot more actions that aren't what they would do from that sort of character.
Because it's a pre-made thing that is not an extension of yourself.
Right. But when you have a game like an MMO where you get to create your character, people get upset if the character does stuff that they don't feel is moral or like makes jokes that they think are dumb or whatever. So we have to walk this line of trying to make the PC's dialogue interesting while also not allowing them to still be a blank that people can project themselves into. So like every so often we'll slip in a little bit of stuff that we feel like, okay, 95% of our player base will feel like they would have done that. They would have given Bram some crap there. And, the 5% that's like, I never would have said that, we can deal with.
We're sorry.
Yeah.
We were flirting with the idea that at the end, the commander and Bram might hug it out.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, that was a thing.
That was going to be a cinematic.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that was just probably not tonally correct. But I just like the idea of, like, you jerking the chain at the end, but at the end you guys are, like, just hugging it out.
Yeah. It felt a little too facile. It felt a little too, like, we hadn't earned it yet. And it does feel like, you have the commander who is essentially been forced into the role of a military commander or whatever her background. And then you have Bram, who's kind of a teenager and stuff. And so, like, it felt like they would have this heart-to-heart, but they would both be at some level still kind of uncomfortable with the fact that they were having it.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. And that's like you said, with everything that's gone on over the past season or so, it doesn't make sense for him to be like, okay, we're cool now.
Yeah.
Let's just have a little hug and everything's fine.
Yeah.
I still kind of want to see that.
I know, me too. One day, God willing.
Play and find out.
That should be just the name of the whole show. Play and find out. We don't know. We will find out. So, do you want to talk some more about narrative development? Because there was just, not in general, about this episode. Tell us everything about your job.
Oh, boy.
No, just, that's like you said, and we've talked about this on the show before, a lot of what came before was a moving target.
Yeah.
Because you're working on something when something else that's about to go live is changing, and you have to go back and retrofit. And there were just a lot of conversations around, like, Timmy's character development.
Oh, yeah. I mean, part of the thing that Tom is really hardcore about, and I mean I am too, is that we want to, like, you don't want your characters to actually behave and talk like real people. Like, people who are not screenwriters often think you want naturalistic dialogue. You want people to talk just like they talk in real life. Nobody wants to hear that. We're not good at it. Like, we're not good at talking, I mean, as a species.
This is why we have people like you.
Well, I'm not good at talking, but, you know, there's a lot of there's a lot of, like, going back and fixing, editing stuff you've previously said. So dialogue is still elevated even when you're trying to make it sound naturalistic. And characters are, you know, you don't want characters that actually behave exactly like real people, because real people aren't consistent. You know, people complain if fictional characters are all over the place, but real people aren't consistent. So anyway, but one of the things that we did want to do was be true to the integrity, and I know this is going to sound pretentious as hell, but like be true to the integrity of what's happening to the characters. So like if Timey gets captured by an evil lich who might either kill her or torture her to death or kill her and reawaken her as a zombie, like that shouldn't be an excuse for you and your character to be like, oh cool, now we get to go on a fun rescue Timey adventure, right? Like it should feel like this is bad and there should be lasting consequences for it. And so there's also a lot of character setup that's going on right now. Like, you know, reading some of the feedback, some of the people were like, oh my gosh, there's so much character development. And then some people were like, there was like no character development, which is fascinating to me because there was a ton, but a lot of it is invisible at this point because it's setup. A lot of it is a line of dialogue that we're going to call back to in a later episode. A lot of it is a character's reaction is maybe a little off, doesn't seem quite, you know, right. And that's because there's something else happening there that you don't know about. And so yeah, so it's a lot of setup going on in this episode. Like episode 1 was basically just sort of, it's the start of a new season, reestablish who these characters are, what are their goals, what do they care about. Episode 2 was a lot of groundwork, so.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Something that I had noticed, speaking of character consistency, we had talked before about how heartbreaking Timey, what a good job Debbie Derryberry did when Timey was in trouble in the last episode. And I noticed that when she heard that her friends were with the inquest, and that crestfallen, it was a callback to Timey's. She's very brash, and she's got this whole, you know, I'm the wonder kid, and but when stuff happens, when things go really, really wrong, that kid comes out underneath, and even as she grows older, you can still hear that. Yeah,
and you have to think about how much of her I'm the Wonder Kid is fronting, right? Because, like,
totally.
She's super, super smart. She's got a once-in-a-generation mind, and she has this degenerative disease that she can't cure. Like, her body is betraying her, and all the science in the world, she hasn't been able to fix that. And so a lot of the, like, I'm really smart is a reaction to this thing that eats at her, that there's the problem she can't solve.
Yeah, and there's sort of finding a silver lining, compensating.
Yeah.
Were you down there for our VO sessions?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
The Debbie session for episode 1. I know we're here to talk about episode 2, but man, the session for episode 1 was hard. Like the director told us, he like turned off all the lights in the booth so that she couldn't see us. And he told us, he like switches off the microphone and he's like, once we start this section where she's terrified and she's sobbing and she's breaking down, if you have any notes, like give them to the production assistant, like whisper them to her and she will bring them to me. I don't want you talking. If Debbie comes out for a break, don't make eye contact with her. Don't talk to her. Wow. Because you guys are going to want to break the mood. You're going to want to make her feel better. And like she'll sense that and we're not going to get the sort of performance we need. And like, it was hard. I wanted to strangle Phil, the director. I'm like, why are you hurting her? Because, you know, like Debbie actually has this little girl voice, even when she's not acting.
I was stunned the first time I talked to her outside of the recording. I was, oh, that's you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so you're hearing this, like, this little girl voice. And I mean, she's tiny too.
Yeah, she's
this super sweet, tiny woman with this very childlike voice sobbing, and like she was actually crying, and like it was really, I actually had to like go out and get some air at one point because I was like, and you know, like I wrote some of those lines and I'm like, I did this to her.
I didn't know what I was doing.
I know, right? So it was really hard, but I mean, I think the you know, I mean, like, she came out, and, like, we're all like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And she's kind of like, yeah, I'm fine, I'm an actor. But,
Yeah,
like,
but-
you were supposed to believe I was suffering. That's literally my job.
Everybody's weeping. I did good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was hard. So
The episode 2 sessions with her had to have been nothing's going to be that bad. For
Yeah.
a while. I can't imagine having to be down there listening to that. It would have been awful. But
episode 2 sessions, we run 2 studios at once.
Right.
And so I was in the other studio. I wasn't at Timmy's session, but I was there for a lot of the Omicron stuff and for a lot of which was really fun. Like, episode 2 was a much more fun recording session.
Yeah.
There was some heavy stuff in episode 1. But yeah.
Yeah. I really like the Omicron.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in Omicron and the VO, I think at one point, Cameron, when you're supposed to go to the Cubs and, like, kind of talk to them about what's going on, like, they're all supposed to be kids, but at some point in the process, one of the kids was, like, straight up adult. And it was, like, the weirdest thing to hear.
What? So we voice process a lot of the char lines whenever they're a male adult char to kind of just add the kind of grungy feel to it. And we had this male kid who was accidentally flagged as a male adult. And so, and his line was like, I'm not scared. I think we should go and fight them. And
because I'm 40.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And
it's coming from this small,
Right.
tiny little char. And I sat there, like, looking at it and listening to it, like, this can't be right. I hope this isn't how deep the voice actor we got was, because I'm going to have to make him an adult. And then luckily it was just the flag for the voice process.
He's that one kid in 6th grade who already has a mustache, and you're just like,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
that's who we hired. And somebody was
6
not
foot
thinking
in
that
6th grade, man.
The Char Kids recording session actually was a little bit hard too, just because you have these kids who, like, basically their parents have disappeared, right? And you come in as the commander, and you essentially have the Char elders being like, because this kid bursts in and is like, "Where's my dad?"
That
and,
was
like,
hard to listen to.
Yeah, right? And, like, you know that the dad's dead. And the thing is, the kid's not stupid. The kid figures it out pretty fast.
Yeah, kids aren't idiots.
Right, yeah, I know. They're smart. And so then you have to, like, go, you know, the elders are kind of like, hey, can you kind of distract the kid while we decide what we're going to do about this? And you go and, you know, you've got a bunch of kids who are like, we're going to go fight. Like, I'm going to go get my dad. And it is such, you know, I think it was Armand that wrote those lines, or maybe it was Peter. And it felt so real to me, like how kids feel like they have to protect adults from the truth of the bad things they know. And, like, that was hard in the session.
It was really interesting to watch the evolution of that scene, because the first time that we envisioned the Cubs, we talked about how the commander would come out of the meeting with the elders, and the Cubs would be there, and they would just kind of look at you as like this superhero and just see you in this wondrous light and ask you all these questions. And our first take on the dialogue was hilarious, because we're trying to, like, get the timing of it right, so they're talking over each other and, like, just spitting out a bunch of questions that you can't answer. And while that was really awesome to hear, I think it didn't match the tone of what we wanted. And so going back and kind of re-envisioning that, and then saying, like, you know, we're trying to show that this culture in general is suffering not only from just ancillary things that you couldn't control, but from things that you accidentally put into motion. And so let's play on that a little bit more. And I think that came out really well.
Yeah, I mean, I've read a lot of stuff that, like, oh, the Omicron are pacifist. And it's like, they're not necessarily pacifist. What they are is a really small group that, like, is continually kind of in danger of getting wiped out. Like, you know, if the Awakened hadn't shown up and engaged the Inquest, like, the Inquest might have, you know, step 2 of their experiments might have been to just release a scarab plague on the village. You know, like, that's the implication. And so, you know, it's not that they're necessarily pacifist. It's not that they're scared when they're like, should we get out of here? It's like, they're like, there aren't that many of us. Like, we don't know that we can fight this. And so there's this culture that's living under threat constantly.
They have to be really conservative with the battles that they engage in, right? And the actions they take.
It's a really
one
hard
of them
question.
commented on that. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, it's a really hard question of whether or not you stay to fight for your home or you go and you find another one.
Yeah, well, and for a group like the Omicron, which split off from and left the Char homeland. I think for them, there's a very strong ethic. Their home is wherever their tribe is, right? Like they're not necessarily attached to a particular piece of land. So for them, it was like, we're not going to die. There's pride, certainly. There's a bunch of them that are like, we're not going to let these people just drive us out. But there is, certainly an ethic among some of the elders where they're like, we'll just go somewhere. Like, as long as we have our people with us, we're fine. We'll just go somewhere else.
We're okay. And I think it was one of the elders who was saying that when they were talking amongst themselves and saying, fighting, this is an absolute last resort.
Yeah.
What else have we got? So it didn't strike me as too pacifist, but just the tone of, especially the Char Cubs, like you were talking about, struck me as really on point, because I feel like those kids who are ready to go out and do what they feel like their parents won't are not going to look at this interloper like, oh, you're so cool.
Right.
Yeah.
It worked out really, really well. You guys did a really good job. And all the teams involved did. I mean, not just, hey, you three all by yourselves.
Yeah.
Put this out.
It was all us. We made this game.
Yeah, just us three.
Well, I'm stunned that you're here. Do you guys want to talk about the map a little bit? Because that's, like you said, it was one of the most gorgeous areas.
Oh, so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really fun to kind of envision what this area was going to look like, because we were given pretty much a blank slate, right? We had the open world map that was just the parchment that just showed this little peninsula, and then a couple islands going down from there. And what was it, like June or May?
Yeah,
when we were
because I
first
came
starting
on
to
around
envision it?
August, and that was like you guys had like just about ready to move the cube.
Yeah,
which was like crazy.
And we had a very different narrative for the episode there. So we were thinking about this map in terms of, okay, what kind of cultures are there? What kind of environments are there? And I actually have a little cutout just before this. Our map artist came by and just kind of like put this on my desk, and I looked at it and I was like, what is this? And it turns out this is actually the first little like shot top down of our map design. And we have and we mentioned this in the AMA, we have just like a little tiny island up in the northwest for the wild char, just a little tiny one. They were only going to be kind of like a little bit of world building.
I like Bora Bora.
Yeah.
Right over here.
And we had the kind of like the Scotland coast idea, and at one point we were going to have the volcano that's as part of this peninsula kind of involved in this map. But we saw the further that we got into development that it was just feeling kind of disconnected. And what we really wanted to do, I think in this episode and just in season 4 in general, is have every part of the episode embrace the narrative and help it go along. Because it's really easy to get away from yourself with like, oh, this would be cool, this would be fun, but it doesn't really add to the story.
Yeah, it's that line that we've talked about a lot of times before. I have a cool idea. It doesn't fit. Yeah, but I really like my idea.
Yeah.
It can be hard.
It's like, make yourself like a dry erase board or notebook or wherever, because I mean there's always going to be more content where maybe we can fit it in. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea just because it's not right for this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. There's a lot of shelved things that we can just pull from in the future. But this map in particular, I think, especially over the last month of development, just like everything really came together. We started getting the VO, and the Olmacon village just like came to life, and it really felt like it had been lived in. And we had the really awesome juxtaposition of the kind of wild, overgrown areas with the Asura, just kind of the bulldozing of the land and building on it. And then the awakened parts of the map where we show that, and it's just all like tar-filled and desiccated.
And it's always fun to see. There's like these three main factions. You have the Omicron, you have the Awakened, you have the Inquest, and they're all kind of like fighting each other. Like there's moments and scenes where we put in there where Awakened are fighting Inquest, and it's really fun to just be traversing and seeing this battle go down, and like who's gonna win this turf war, and like, and it's like, and it's really just like us placing like some NPCs. So and you know it's kind of random. Sometimes you'll see the Awakened win, sometimes you'll see the Inquest win, but it's like a golem versus a giant like mummy. It's awesome.
Yeah,
sweet.
Who would win?
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah.
Well, you're right. It did come together really, really well.
Yeah, I was actually kind of worried. up until like the last couple of months that we have this place in the north of the map. The whole northern island with the Char village is a very different tone than the rest of the map, because it's about learning about this culture, what their day-to-day lives are like, and how that's impacted by your actions. And we have events like you can pick up a spear gun and go fishing, right? You can wrangle up some marmoxes and bring them back to the pens. And then you go further south, and just like right across the water, there's this island that's in constant attack mode, right? And there was this fear that those were so tonally different that it would just feel off and disconnected. And somehow, I don't really know how we did it, right? You know, it's greater than the sum of its parts, but there's this nice gradient as you go south that things just get more and more chaotic and drastic, and it really worked out.
Yeah, it did. I'm glad you're happy with it, because as just going through as a player, it works out really well, because that gradual escalation is kind of creepy in a good way.
Yeah, it definitely is. And you're always still reminded, like there's always the perimeter of these little islands that have kind of that natural habitat to them. So, and I think that's the thread that keeps together. There's always like this like sand dune with some like trees and stuff, but like maybe like 5 feet away from it, all the way in the south, is just tar and awaken everywhere, or it's the Inquest. And then in Albacon Village, it's like actually all natural and it looks really nice.
I think something that really worked out that I only noticed like 2 days before we shipped was when you first see the cube, there's this sense of wonder, like what's over there? And then whenever you finally go there and you go back to that area and you look back at it, it's an entirely different feeling.
Yeah.
Super cool.
All right, so I have a question for each of you. What was the absolute most fun part of working on this?
Choose.
This is always my favorite question, because you guys come up with such cool stuff.
Yeah. So I have the Scrit chain event, which I thought was really fun, because Scrit 1 are just always fun. Yeah. And then this one was like about getting a superpowered Scrit like out of the Inquest area. And so he's just making like fun different like kind of quips, and the idea is that, you know, Scrit, they get smarter with the more Scrit that you have. So like as you're escorting him out of this facility, you're also hopefully, if you're doing it right, getting other Scrit, which is charging his powers up but also making him smarter. And so, and this is me, like I worked on this, but Aaron originally designed this. I just ended up taking over for a little bit. And like, so we have specific dialogue for him to say as he's like getting smarter or dumber. And so there's different scenes at play at the end. Like, you know, he's very like Miss Cretan, like he'll say in a very like smart voice, or like use like high vocabulary. But then if he's dumb, he's just like, duh, beach, get out. And then there's like a goal that you have to fight. And so it's just always entertaining to work with those creatures.
All right, so if you guys haven't been doing it right now, you are aware there's more Scrit.
Save the Scrit.
Yeah.
How about you, Jessica?
Oh man, I think my favorite part of working on an episode is always, so I'm an extrovert and a writer and an editor, which is a little bit weird because writing and editing is kind of a solitary.
How does that even happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually know a lot of writers who are like, we kind of divide into people who like their alone time and people who are really frustrated that you can't actually like mind meld and write together.
Oh gosh, that'd be amazing.
Right, but the closest we can get to that is generally we have these polish sessions, right? So like, we do an outline. We outline an episode. We work with the designers to do a really detailed outline that fuses gameplay and narrative. So we don't end up in a situation where the writers have gone off and written a script and the designers have gone off and designed a game, and you put them together and they don't work. And so, like, the designers put in temp dialogue or, like, tell us what they need. The writer goes and writes a script. It comes to me. I do a fairly heavy dev edit pass on it. Then it goes to Tom for a tone polish. And then, you know, there's a bunch of iteration. And then we do these polish sessions where we get a bunch of writers, including people who aren't working on this episode, in a room, and we read it out loud. We do a table read. We act it out. Yeah. And then we sit there and we polish the lines as a group. So it is this very, like, collective writing session. And there's also, you know, we have people who are more enthusiastic about acting in the line readings than others. None of us are going to win Oscars anytime soon, you know.
But it's fun.
It's fun. I mean, like, Tom actually was an actor, so, like, poor Tom, he's got the rest of us who are, like...
I was in a couple of those meetings. Those are really, really fun.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, they're, and it's the moment in which I feel like the dialogue really, it always levels up from those sessions because we have so much, you know, like we have Armand, who's a fairly experienced screenwriter and is like really good with structure and is like, hey, we didn't give that detail that this later stuff builds on. And, you know, we have Samantha, who's funny. We have a bunch of people who are funny.
Oh, Samantha's hilarious.
I know, right? So like it's just this really good mix of different strengths and different writing styles. And so like we come out of there with dialogue that's really elevated from what I came in as, and it's just, you know, there's a lot of laughing, there's a lot of joking, there's a lot of like stuff that probably is boring as hell to be in if you're not like a writer, because sometimes we will spend like 15 minutes on one line just trying to figure out how to make it work right. So
That's how it gets good.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's how it works.
How about you?
Oh man, it's hard to choose.
So many.
I kind of want to cheat a little bit and say that it's my favorite part has been just kind of going through and adding in the little details to bring things to life. So the very north of the map, there are these hunting grounds, and so there's a lot of wild animals, and there's no inquest presence. There's nothing there in terms of sentient creatures other than like one or two Olmecon. And so
everybody else walked backwards out and
right, yeah, exactly.
Right.
They all just kind of like moonwalked away. And this area became this testing ground for me kind of early on in development of how do I make these creatures really seem like wild animals, right? And so we have like little birds that are flying in the sky that aren't something that the map artist placed in there. Like I ended up going through and getting them to go on a path and putting them really high up in the air and just testing out these little things. And that all came together when some of the artists got on board with that. And so we have these elite rare spawns that are all over that area that all have unique interactions. So there's a lion that goes on the prowl. There's a hyena that starts jumping up the rocks towards like a little outlook that looks over the rest of the map. And I remember one of the artists, Kate, ended up coming up to me and was just like, you know, it'd be really cool if we gave these creatures unique models and like we added even more character to them through art. And that was awesome to hear. And so we ended up working together and just like working with all the different professions to really nail that sense of realism. It immerses you a lot more whenever everything can come together towards that, rather than just, you know, me working in a silo.
Right. That's one of the things I love. We talked about that earlier with so many other teams pitching in to help you guys with all of this weirdness that happened with the episode. The different teams just working together, Kate coming to you, and how can we make this better?
Yeah.
How can we make this work better? How can we make this cooler? How can we make it feel more alive? Is such a neat thing that I see it with every episode, but especially here, with everybody pitching in to help out and make it come more to life.
It's something I think the studio does really well, is people being excited about other people's work.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking like the other day I was in the kitchen getting more tea and just kind of listening to conversations that were going on around me, and it was people being like, oh my gosh, did you see the new animation for the thing? I can't say because it's a spoiler. Like, that's so cool. We've got to tell, you know, we've got to tell the animators what a good job they did. You know, it's just this ethic of like appreciating other people's work.
It is. Have you guys noticed that the impromptu kitchen meetings are the best?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so much happens in there.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like I'm a big believer in the idea that the way that spaces are designed shapes interactions, and I'm so glad that when they did our space here, they clearly put a lot of thought and probably a lot of money into designing the kitchen. Because kitchens are where people...
Yeah,
the kitchen is where you feel like family, right?
It's very true. And, you know, I'm here at 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's usually at least 3 people, like, staggering around getting cereal and milk. And
Oh man, those gerbil feeders.
the extra feeders are the worst.
I know.
But they're also the best.
So we don't have a toaster because they want everybody to use the microwave, and the microwaves are all stacked on each other, so that's why we're all standing there together, forced to
Well,
interact.
there's
and
toaster
talk.
ovens in the
There's
corner.
toaster
so there's
oven.
that
It's
too.
not the same as a toaster, though. We're
I'm
talking
just
like 15
saying.
minutes or 1 minute, but yeah. It all makes sense now. You're enlightening me. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're all gonna stand there now. We can talk and have these.
Is that why we don't have a toaster?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
It works
To make people
works
talk.
All by design, yeah.
Honestly, where would we put it? I don't understand
yeah.
how, but that kitchen is so big, and I'm constantly bumping into someone in there. I'm like,
I know.
sorry. I just want tea.
That's kitchens in general, though. No matter how big it is,
It
there's
doesn't
never enough
matter.
space.
That kitchen
yeah.
could be all of 4, and we would still be crashing into each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It is a good illustration. Just walking through the kitchen, and you're hearing people from 2 totally different teams coming together and getting excited about each other's work to make it better. It is a extremely cool thing about this studio, and you're right. It is something we do well. Yeah. So, well, we are coming up on an hour. Is there anything else that you guys want to touch on about this episode? We don't have a hard stop at 1 o'clock, so if you want to, it's fine.
Man, I think just if you have the time and the inclination, just like this is a good episode to just explore. You know, there's so much around the Olmecon village. There's a sort of series of little vignettes around this particular character that, like, when I first read the script for it, like, actually got choked up. You know, it's like really moving, really beautiful. The main thrust of the episode, obviously, is, you know, you're infiltrating the cube, and it is very combat focused, but there's so much there that is just people in this world living their lives, and that you get a little glimpse into it. And so, like, go looking for it. It's worth it.
Yeah.
Piggyback off that, there is an amazing thing that Alex, one of our writers, put in the Inquest Lab, which has gone viral internally in our team, which using just one sentence for the commander to reply to another Inquest on the other side, to have a full, complete conversation. And it is like the most entertaining
I know exactly what you're talking about.
and witty thing. So that's a little like Easter egg nugget. Go find it. You will enjoy it.
Yes, that was Alex.
Yeah.
Alex Kane, yeah.
That was thank you, Alex, because that is awesome. I laughed so hard. I was like, "Oh, how is this gonna? Oh, that's how that's gonna work. That's amazing."
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Okay, I'll do it. That does remind me. There was another little bit of dialogue in there that I loved when you were interacting with the Inquest terminals, and there was one. I forgot my password again. And who did that? Do you guys know?
I don't remember. And I mean, it's hard to say because every bit of dialogue goes through multiple writers and editors, and like I said, we sit in a group and we polish each line, and so it's more on the level of like that word came from that person.
Yeah, that is.
But there are sometimes things like Alex's convo, but I don't remember who that was.
Well.
It was probably one of those things where, you know, we get punchy. We've been in a room for like 4 hours, and it's like somebody's like, I forgot my trying to log into their laptop. Like, I forgot my password, and we're like, oh, we should put that in.
Yeah.
So.
That's perfect. One last thing, you mentioned everything going through tons of iterations and all of this different dialogue and all of these brainstorming sessions, and I want to talk about naming Rada Primus. Because we got I got Tom Abernathy's permission to share his suggestions. There were like 10 of them, and I actually
scrolling along on the screen.
Yes.
So
oh man,
I'm
starting to understand why some of these sessions take so long.
Yeah. So we at some point we were like, we'd just been calling it the cube internally, and we're like, we need to actually give it a name. And so there was a lot of distinction or a lot of discussion, and finally we were like, we need to consolidate this. We're going to do it by email. It was actually you're the Dirty Rada who killed my brother. Oh no, it's never mind. Sorry, it was you, Dirty Rada. So, you know, we had this whole. Tom starts it off and is like, here are my suggestions. It gives us this hilarious list. And then, like, we had a much more serious, like, what are the linguistic influences? You know, originally we were like, well, it's in Alona, which is sort of an Africa, Middle East analog. Like, should we be drawing from, like, Semitic or African languages? So we had a bunch of, like, suggestions, you know, from, like, referencing, like, Akkadian words for dragon and all of that. And eventually we were like, well, the Inquest, we've already basically established our Latin-ish.
The ship has sailed.
Yeah, so, like, we'll just go with...
There was also an internal debate, specifically, I think, between you and Armin, about Primus and Primus.
Yep.
But we know which one won.
But
that was
I'm meaner than Armin.
This feels like it's going to be the Wyvern argument again.
Oh yeah, yeah.
or frickin' Golem versus Gollum. Gollum is a character in the Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
A golem is
Mark's
a golem.
giving a big thumbs
Yeah,
up.
right?
Mark says.
Mark approves.
And we were in a meeting and Neil called it a Gollum, and I'm like, at 2, Neil, come on, like, have my back here. But yeah.
Like before you even sit down in a meeting, or as I'm sitting down and they're walking in, this conversation happened. I'm like, sweet, we're doing this again.
We're
like,
here.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
here for
always
this.
entertaining to see. Like, and then you just like grab your popcorn. Like, who's gonna win this?
I mean,
Who's
it's
gonna get
weird
this?
that it was, the anglicized Latin versus the like Latin pronunciation, which felt like a step. Like in high school, I took Latin, and we had one teacher who taught like classical Latin, like Weni Witty Wiki, and then we had one teacher that taught church Latin, like Veni Vidi Vici, the much more Italian sounding. And so the teacher who taught classical Latin was named Mr. Vetrano. And so he was the one that I was taking his class, and he was out one day. So the other teacher, Mr. Streff, the church Latin guy, came in and substitute taught our class. And so like he was like, Caesar was a manly man. He never would have said something like Weni Witty Wiki. It's Veni Vidi Vici, and you can tell that to Mr. Vitrano.
That's what I saw coming as soon as you said Vetrano.
And so like there was this whole like continuing in our high school, this whole like continuing war over pronunciation, and then as soon as we start using Latin and there's like this, you know what I mean, like it got really detailed and really pedantic and really. But it's Primus.
But
I won.
End of story.
The important part. The important part. Here.
Yes. Well, see, like that's the good thing about being an editor is you're the last person to touch the text.
Jessica. Somebody changed this. I don't know who.
No, it's like you can rewrite it however many times you want, but I'm gonna see it right before it goes into the bill.
By virtue of my job, I get the last word. So
I know, it's great.
Wear yourself out.
Yep.
And I was laughing at Tom's suggestions, and you gifted me with this email chain.
I know, it was a great
I was
chain.
like, please let me. Hi, Tom. I just have a little question. But the whole rest of the chain was fascinating because it was, and I don't necessarily like the word pedantic because, not as a whole, but in this situation, it just feels like such thorough attention to detail.
Yeah.
And that's like what Cameron was talking about, where these little bitty things bring the world to life and make it feel better.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can still go with pedantic, but
it's the details are what make world building work.
And the conversation fascinated me. I'm just reading through this email chain because I wasn't on it originally, just going, this is amazing, the things they're thinking about.
It's got to feel like there's a history there. Like when you build a culture into a world, like you have to think about how did they get to be the way that they are. Otherwise, it's just going to feel shallow. And it is like the details. It is things like, how do they pronounce? Like it's weird to me that all of our humans in our world speak the same language, but we do have like words like that are different. Like in Alona, they greet you with a hi, which suggests that maybe at one point they spoke a different language, or something.
Oh no, now I'm thinking about this.
Well, right, but like those are the things that make a world feel real, feel lived in. That it's details and it's like that little bit of messiness that you want. You don't want everything to be too neat.
Right.
Yeah. Like how we put in the nature favorite you.
Yeah.
For the Omicron.
Yeah, like they don't speak a different language, but they speak English or whatever,
differently.
Tyrian Common, whatever it is, whatever the universal language in our world is. Like they speak it differently, they use it differently because they have a different history from everybody around them.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I did want to say, just kind of as a call out, it's been really awesome to see since we released the amount of times that people from our team have kind of like passed around comments from the forums or on Reddit.
Yeah.
And as we're moving on to like the next thing, I know that like I always read through all of these, and Clay, you always bring a lot of these up. So your feedback is awesome. And the things that you liked about this, the things that you maybe didn't like about it, like we're listening really attentively, and we really want to hear your voice. So if you have anything to say, post it. It's awesome.
That helps make it better in most cases.
Yeah.
That seems like a good point to wrap up on. So
Yeah.
thank you guys very, very much for all of your work on this. I know you put in a ton of extra work to make it so good, and it paid off.
Thanks for having us.
So, and thank you guys for being here. We will be back on the next Guild Chat.